Polynomials, identifying key elements. Okay, so the first question you might ask is, what is a polynomial? So a polynomial is an expression where you have a sum of terms. Remember, sum means adding up terms, and each term will have a coefficient, which is just a real number in front, and then it will have a variable like x or y raised to a power. Now, the power has to be a whole number. Let me give an example. Okay, so here is an example. We have 1, 2, 3 different terms that are being added up. Now you might say, oh, well, there's a minus. Remember, minus 5x here is just like plus a minus 5x. So we've got 3 terms being added, or in this case, subtracted. And each of the terms has what's called a coefficient. So that's the number part in front. These are all the coefficients. And each of the terms also has a variable like x raised to a power. So here are the variables. You might think, wait, there's no variable here with the 7? Well, if you remember the 0 power, remember x to the 0 power is 1. So actually every single term here has a coefficient that's a real number, 3 minus 5, 7. And it also has a variable raised to a power, x to the power 2, x to the power, when there's no power, that means power 1. And in this case, the last term is x to the power 0. Let's look at a few more examples. A common question, you'll be given an expression, and they'll ask you, is it a polynomial? Well, remember the definition. Firstly, it has to be adding or subtracting different terms, which we see here. We say adding and subtracting of terms. Now the terms should have coefficients, that's numbers that are real numbers. This is a real number, this is a real number, this is a real number. And it can also have variables raised to powers that are whole numbers. So the variable a, the variable b, and this one, there's no variable, but that's always that means to the power 0, so that's just fine. And the powers here are 2 and 1. Even though the variables are different, that's fine. So we would say, yes, this is a polynomial. Okay, here's another example. Square root of p squared plus 2p minus 5. Well, right away I see a problem. A polynomial has to be a sum of terms. Now we have some terms being added up underneath the square root, but the main thing happening here is the square root. So because we have this as the main thing, we have to say, no, it's not a polynomial. Okay, here's a third example. We see that there are 3 terms, and they are added or subtracted, so that's fine. And we see the coefficients 3, minus 9, and plus 2. Those are all real numbers, so that's fine. But I do see a problem. The problem is right here. Remember that this term is equivalent to 2x to the power minus 3. Now the powers, remember, to be a polynomial, the powers all have to be positive. So we need positive powers. So again, we're going to say, no, this one is not a polynomial. Okay, one more example. Look at this one. This only has 1 term. I don't see anything added or subtracted. But that's okay. We can have only 1 term as a polynomial. That's fine. Let's look at the coefficient. The coefficient of square root is square root of 2, which even though it's irrational, it's a real number. That's fine. And then we have variables to the powers of whole numbers, a to the 1, b to the 2. So even though this is a little bit odd looking, yes, it is still a polynomial. Okay, here are some vocabulary words we use all the time when talking about polynomials. About the degree, which is the highest power, number of terms, which is the number of items that are added or subtracting in the expression, leading term, which is the term with the highest power, and the leading coefficient, which is the number in front of the term with the highest power. Do an example. Start with a polynomial like this one I wrote in green. You first it's a good idea to put the polynomial in descending order, where we rearrange the terms from highest power to lowest power. So firstly, I would write minus 5x to the 5th, because that is the highest power. Then plus 3x to the cubed, that's the next highest. Then we'll have plus 7x squared. That's the next highest. And then minus 8. Remember, that's just like x to the power 0. There's no power there. So now we can go ahead and answer the question, what is the degree of this polynomial? Remember, the degree is the highest power. In this case is 5. How many terms are there? So the number of terms, we'll just count how many things were added or subtracted. 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. Then they're going to ask what is the leading term. So the leading term is the entire term that has the highest power. So in this case, minus 5x to the 5th. And then lastly, we might say, well, what is the leading coefficient? The leading coefficient in this case is the number in front of the term with the highest power. That means the number in front of the leading term. That's the leading coefficient. In this case, minus 5. Now let's talk about some special types of polynomials. So it turns out that when a polynomial only has one term, it has a special name. It's called a monomial. So here's some examples of monomials. There's nothing added or subtracted. It's just the one term. And so that's a monomial. If we want some extra practice, this monomial has degree. That means the highest power is 1. It has a leading coefficient of 2. This next one has the degree. Remember, that's the the highest power is 2, and the leading coefficient in this case is minus 3. Okay, we also have what's called a binomial, and that's when we have two terms being added or subtracted, like in these two examples. You see there's one term, two terms. One term, two terms being added or subtracted. And just for some extra practice, we can look here and say the degree of this polynomial, remember, is the highest power, it's 2. The leading coefficient is the number in front of the term with the highest power, that's also 2. Let's get another color. This one, the degree is the highest power, so the degree is 3, and the leading coefficient is the number in front of the term with the highest power, that would be 5. Okay, lastly, we can talk about the word trinomial. Trinomial is when the polynomial has 3 terms that are added or subtracted. 1, 2, 3, or in this case, the second example, 1, 2, and 3. So again, if we want to talk just for extra practice about the degree of this first one would be 2. It's the highest power. And the leading coefficient would be 3, the number in front of the term with the highest power. Be careful about this second one. It's not written in descending order, and it's much easier if you do write it in descending order. Okay, so writing this last example in descending order, that means we take the highest powered term and put it first. Minus 2 y to the 4th. Then plus 4y to the power 3, that's the next biggest power. Then lastly, minus 3y squared. So if we were going to talk about the degree, we'd say the degree in this case is 4. We'd say the leading coefficient in this case is minus 2. Sometimes polynomials have more than one variable, like x's and y's in the same term. So the question is, how do you decide the degree? So the degree in these cases, you have to look at it term by term, and you basically add the powers in each term. So if we look at the first term and we add the powers, 4 plus 7 is 11. If we look at the second term and we add the powers, 2 plus 5 equals 7. And then lastly, we can look at the last term. Be careful here because x is to the power 1 if you don't see a power. So then we do 1 plus 4 equals 5, which means the first term's degree is 7. The first term's degree is 11. The second term's degree is 7. And the third term's degree is 5. So the highest power, the degree in this case, is 11. Degree is the highest power of any one term. Okay, do one more practice with that. Let's look at this example, which has a lot of different variables in each term. Remember, this is a trinomial because there are 3 terms being added. 1, 2, 3. If we want to know the degree, then we have to add the powers in each term and then take the one with the highest total. So let's look at the first term. The powers are 2 plus q to the power 1 plus r to the power 5. The degree in that case is 8. For the second term, again, it's p to the power 1 plus q to the power 8, r to the power 2. The degree in that term is 11. And then lastly, this one is p to the power 3, q to the power 3, r to the power 1. The degree in that term is 7. So the overall degree will be the highest power, in this case, also 11. Okay, I hope this helps you know about the vocab words and about how to talk about polynomials.